use your God power to get everything you ever wanted and live the life of your dreams. The Master's Course. Copyright 2010 by Richard Lee McKim Jr. All rights reserved. Let the quest for knowing begin. The brain map is no different than the radio dial. At different places on the dial or in the brain, you get different results. Not because they function there, but because they are represented there. They can be found there. They are accessible there. But they don't function there, and that is a very important distinction. Okay, let's take a look at this illustration. We've got a radio dial imposed over the brain map. And in the same way as the different radio stations were discovered in different locations on the radio dial, there are different functions or represented functions that have been discovered in different places on the brain. If you look on the radio dial and you come way over here to 160 area, you're getting over near the visual memory. But if you come over here on the radio dial around 90, somewhere between 90 and 92, you see the coordination of physical action. Here it says a brain function was discovered here, and there's an arrow pointing to location A. And another brain function was found here and here, location B and C. And brain functions were found here also. It seems that no matter what brains the scientists were working on, in the same way as I was checking out different radios, they think they found the same abilities and the same functions in the same places. Huh, isn't that interesting? And yet, they think it functions there. Here with this illustration, we realize that just because you discovered a function there, just because you see an eye there, just because you see that when you mess with that part of the brain, you notice changes in your visual system or in your motor abilities or whatever, doesn't mean that that's where they function. They don't function there. In the same way as just because someone's lost their eyes doesn't mean they can't see. They can still see. Because that's not where it was functioning. That's where it was represented. So all these functions in the brain are not in the brain. The brain is a giant radio dial. You can see all the represented functions there. But if something were to happen to the dial, you could still tune in the radio station. If something happens to the brain in those locations, you can still have those functions because they weren't there. They were only represented there. The dial is not the tuner. The brain is not the thinker. It's not the thinking, processing, functioning location. Remember when that woman popped out of her body? Now, of course, we've talked about a lot of them. But the one that's most significant for us is the one where the woman whose body was put on ice. Now let's cover that one more time. The blood was drained out of her body. Now, when she was going in for her brain operation, naturally, she thought that they're going to be working on her head and cutting her head open and all that. Of course, they were. But when she popped out of her body, and by the way, her brain was completely shut down. They had all kinds of measuring devices on it to measure it and to check it out and to monitor it to make sure it was shut down because they didn't want to be operating on her brain when it was functioning. It was shut down. Her breathing stopped. Her heartbeat stopped. She was totally shut down and iced. Okay? There was nothing functioning whatsoever. Now, the interesting thing was, right when they were cutting her skull open, she popped out of her body, floated up to the ceiling, and was watching from up above. Now, the thing that caught her attention was that they were messing with her legs. In fact, when she got back in her body and she came to after the operation, which was successful, she said, "Hey, what were you doing with my legs? Because, it's a brain thing." And they explained to her, "Oh, the reason why we were messing with your legs is because that's where we were draining the blood out, and we had to put a catheter or some kind of thing in down there. And apparently one leg's veins wasn't good enough for what they needed to do, so they were working on the other leg." But she could have never seen that in her condition of being not only anesthetized, but all the blood drained out of her body, her heart has stopped, her breathing has stopped, and her brain has stopped. But when she popped out of her body, she was thinking, she was conscious, she was observing, she was listening, she was watching. Those are all thinking functions. Those are all consciousness functions. How do you explain that she could see, she could remember, she could think, she was conscious, she could hear from that location when her body was down on the table, on ice, not breathing, no blood, and ice down? How do you explain that? Well, the way you explain that is that her thinking, hearing, seeing, consciousness was never a function of the flesh of the body. It was never a function of the body. It's a separate function in the energy realm, and it always has been, it always will be. That's where it is. She popped out of her body, and she had all the functionality that she had in the body, because the functionality was not a part of the flesh. So when something happens to somebody's brain, it doesn't mean that they can't function anymore. If they think they can, then they can't. Like if somebody loses their sight, if somebody loses their eyes because they got poked out, they naturally think, I have no eyes, or my physical representation of eyes is no longer functioning, therefore my seeing ability is no longer functioning. And if they make that kind of meaning, if they make that association, if they make that link, then they're not going to see.
Richard will continue this explanation on the next segment, number 66. Options. Now activating the next video, play options. 1 moment please. Click on the green arrow to start watching the next video. Or, click on the red arrow to start watching the prior video. Or, click on the tan arrow to go to the main course menu and guide, with links to all course chapters, excerpts, and special reports. Up next, special video options. Click on your choice of course videos, menus, and excerpts. Now switching to the special video options menu and activating the video selection buttons. Click on your selection number to start watching the video. "15 seconds till we switch to the next page with the free download information. Pause the video now if you need more time to review the available selections." This is the end of this course video. Its video number is listed above. To watch the next video, simply click on the next video in number sequence. Thank you.